well-trained numbers of motivated infantrymen to take and hold ground. It's an immutable rule of conflict and war. We keep having to learn it. And the Russians are running out unless they do a mobilization. From what we can understand, they're clearing out the jails. They're paying lots of people in the east of the country to come lost. Very, very poor people. It's always been a way of recruiting for the armed forces. So the Russians have a difficulty.
Today, we're joined by former Deputy Chief of Staff and Middle East Advisor, Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mayall. Welcome along.
Good afternoon, Luke.
Thanks very much for your time. First of all, let's start with slightly confusing reports about what is happening in Crimea. A Russian base that has been hit by Ukraine, according to some reports. Is it clear what's happening? And also, what can we read into this about Ukraine attacking targets sort of reasonably deep into territory which Russia considers its own?
Yeah, well, it's going to be complex. One of the reasons, as you know, Luke, that the Americans wouldn't give the Ukrainians ATACMS, which are have a much longer range than HIMARS, is that could strike targets within Russia, which would be viewed by the Americans as a real escalation. I mean, they've got the chance to hit the Russians at a much greater range at the moment. So it is interesting that they're now hitting Russian targets, and we're assuming they genuinely are hitting Russian targets rather than sabotage in the Crimea, which, of course, as we know, the international community and the Ukrainians quite rightly view as Ukrainian territory. And it's quite dangerous for the Russians because there's a major base in Sevastopol, and combined with the chance of an offensive down in Kherson, it does show the Ukrainians are determined to keep some sort of initiative in this conflict.
And what do you mean by initiative? Because at a sort of slightly different viewing of it, it is just a somewhat random attack, quite a way away from the actual theatre of conflict.
Well, it's not really random. It's important for the Ukrainians to continue to make the conflict in Ukraine relevant to the West and their supporters of the West. I'm very interested in the way that I saw William Hague talk about we're getting desensitized about the war in Ukraine. There could have been anything up to 60,000 people dead now, let alone wounded, mutilated, you name it. 10,000 Ukrainians have been displaced, probably refugees. And we appear to be drawing a distinction between the problem we've got over energy and the cost of energy and the fact that this is driven by Putin's aggression in Ukraine. And we're making this a domestic issue. It's in fact a global issue and catalyzed by the war in Ukraine. And unless we can bring some sort of solution to the war in Ukraine, we're going to continue to suffer these economic energy issues.
Yeah.
And it's important for the Ukrainians to show that they are going to make the most of the support they're getting at the highest political level and the military level. Make something of that. And I think Kherson and strikes in Crimea that capture the headline show that the Ukrainians are still on the front foot. They're going to do so much.
But well, on the other side of the ledger then, if Ukraine is taking the initiative with all that it's doing there, according to some of these British intelligence reports, which we've been periodically getting, usually via Twitter, weirdly, from the Ministry of Defence, and they say that Russia is again moving very slowly in the Donbass. We've heard criticism of the Ukrainian side not necessarily being up to holding all of the territory that it would like to regain, but still, big problems on the Russian side still in terms of mobilisation?
Very, very big problems, Luke. One thing, despite all the enthusiasm for technology and cyber this and precision strike that, is the actual reality. You need well-trained numbers of motivated infantrymen to take and hold ground. It's an immutable rule of conflict and war. We keep having to learn it. And the Russians are running out unless they do a mobilization. From what we can understand, they're clearing out the jails. They're paying lots of people in the east of the country to come lost. Very, very poor people. It's always been a way of recruiting for the armed forces. So the Russians have a difficulty, and we saw in Mariupol, and people have forgotten about that, what small numbers of very determined, motivated Ukrainian infantry were able to do, holding the steelworks there. Well, if you're going to take villages, continue to advance, you need infantry. Alongside all the high explosives, which we've seen the Russians use to great effect in many ways, but fairly indiscriminately, to make the main. But the reality is the Russians do hold nearly 20% of Ukraine at the moment.
Well, yes, and just in terms of how things might wrap up, Sir Simon, interestingly, there was a poll carried by Russian media, and as much as you can trust public opinion polls in Russia, there is an interesting stat of 65%, it claims, of Russians would back some kind of peace treaty with Ukraine if Vladimir Putin were to propose it. Does that have any sway, do you think, on the way that the Russians are fighting this war and may seek to conclude this war? What ordinary Russians think?
I'd be extremely concerned. I don't think what ordinary inverted commas Russians think is going to have any influence whatsoever in the Kremlin.
Hmm.
Equally, we do know for a very long time, despite the brutality of the Russians, a lot of people support Russia's objectives in the Ukraine. A lot of people support Putin. They have a very long history of sacrifice and deep commitment to the state and Russia's position as a great power. And they feel humiliated. So at the moment, for Putin to back out of what he's doing would be very detrimental to his own hold on power there. So the Russians have a very, very strong sense of national loyalty when these things, when confronted with issues of national pride and national objectives.
Good to talk to you. Thanks for your time. That's Lieutenant General Sir Simon Mayall in our briefing room, John Pienaar's briefing room, I should say. I'm only squatting.